We're talking about work in an AI-powered world, and we're talking about the fact that we might not necessarily be prepared for what's coming. I mean, we at techUK think there's still time to get it right, and I wanted to ask the panelists, do you feel the same way?
Got you.
So polite.
That's exactly. Is there time to get it right? We have enormous opportunity and enormous challenge before us. We have a lot of work to do to get this right. So I'm concerned about a few things. First, we have extraordinarily diverse kinds of organizations in the UK. We have a real diversity of readiness among the organizations in the UK. And so for organizations ready to make digital change or use AI effectively, we have enormous gaps. We have enormous geographical gaps in this country. So we have work to do to get people and companies, organizations ready. The second is we have these enormous skill gaps. We have work that we have to do to have people ready to understand how to work with AI tools and technologies. Now, I'm less pessimistic than some. I come from under a position of studying work in changing technologies, and how industries and companies change is actually really, really, really slow. Like, we are in the beginning of a pathway of change, not at the end. So we still have extraordinarily important work to do of building the capacity for people to work with new kinds of AI tools. And just as an example of that, we were talking before, I will say, I've spent the last 15 years, which seems impossible, but I have spent the last 15 years tracking the rollout of digital tools in high-scale construction, so building construction, right? How things that we might call digital twin, 4D, building information modeling, how these kinds of digital information management tools and techniques are being used in commercial construction. 15 years ago, this was going to change the face of construction. It was going to decimate construction jobs. It was going to kill middle grade engineering firms. And none of this has happened, right? In fact, when we look at the rollout in the industry, they're struggling still to get the people who are trained in the domain knowledge, construction, and the people who can work with digital tools. And I think that's a metaphor for what we're going to have in the UK. We know that the UK is quite advanced in manufacturing, in high-end robotic manufacturing jobs. We know we have to build up skills in the skill sectors for people who are not just designing, building, shaping, developing the tools of tomorrow, but those people who will be using them. And I know Nick has been talking quite a lot to his the companies that work with his organization about what that might look like. So I think I'm both optimistic that we can still make that transition to what good, just, and equitable futures will look like. But I don't think we get there without the attention to making sure that we're bringing people up with us. We're bringing up the regions, we're bringing up the companies, and we're bringing up the people and the skills who are going to be able to benefit from the productivity gains that these tools are promising.
Thank you. Nick, do you agree?
I do. I think I don't need to convince an audience that's come to a tech organised session about AI that AI is happening now. But I think for the broader population, we've got to recognise this isn't just a futuristic conversation. This is now. This is happening. And I think it's happening at a great time. We spend time talking to companies all around the world. In fact, we do this survey twice a year where we speak to over 30,000 workers. And the results are quite clear. Like we see this thing of digital debt. that's built up over decades, just to be clear. It's got worse and worse and worse. 64% of people we spoke to said they are struggling to find the time and even the energy to do their day job.
Yep.
They're just overburdened with noise, and they really need help getting to the signals, the insights, and not just looking at all the noise that they see and all the different tools that they use on a daily basis. And in fact, we also saw that they're spending over half the time just purely communicating with each other in their organization. And we think that should be much less than that. If you could take that communication percentage down to say 20 or 30%, that gives you more time to focus on creating competitive advantage, on innovating, on coming up with new ideas. So we think the time is now, and the tools are now here to help. And we're investing heavily in generative AI tools, either ones that you can build yourself, or ones that are pre-built into the software that we create. And those tools are really going to help to give you either time back or improve the quality of your work. And we're starting to see some interesting results actually from some of our early users. 70% of the people that are using our Copilot for Microsoft 365 are saying they're more productive. 68% are improving the quality of their work. They're catching up on missed meetings 4 times quicker. They're getting through mundane work 29% faster than they did before. So you can start to see some of the benefits that this brings. I think that's what excites me personally, is what's the opportunity with time saved and quality improvements for impacting the productivity of UK PLC.
It's really interesting that you mentioned about how we actually communicate about these tools, and I think we'll come to that later in the session. Lena, what are some of the most significant opportunities and challenges with AI in the workplace?
Thanks, Nick. Just to echo what Nick just said, actually, before I approach that question, the question you asked earlier, is it too late? I think that a lot of companies have this question at the moment, whether it's too early to get started, like should we wait and see what other organisations are doing? Should we see the value that it yields? Like, should we hold off from starting? Versus some companies that have asked the same question, are we too late? Have we lost some sort of competitive advantage because of, other people are really starting to kind of harness the power of AI and starting to work out what it means for their organisations. I agree. I don't think it's too late. I think we've had a digital skills gap for a long time, and I think that the role that AI will play on that is yet to be seen. Will it exacerbate that? Will there be an increased digital skills gap, or actually might it help us close the digital skills gap just because of the way these technologies work and the easy to use interfaces and the rise of sort of like low code, no code and co-pilots that help us do coding now. So it will be really interesting to see how it plays out. In terms of the opportunity, I think the significant opportunity here, and I think it has been mentioned, is the productivity gains. Nick will probably sort of echo this, but we're seeing sort of 25 to 40% when it comes to increases in productivity through the use of some of these tools that are available on the market at the moment. And that's across the software delivery lifecycle. So that means that companies that are looking to build products and services will actually be able to do this at pace. And what I've noticed is no one is short of things that they want to build or deliver to customers, right? So it's not really a race to the bottom. It's actually like, how can we do these things at pace? How can we do more? How can we do better? And how can we use these tools to kind of augment the skill sets that we have to be able to deliver more for customers? I think the challenge that we're seeing at the moment is some of these organisations that we work with have sort of like fundamental issues across the way that they work, and they're not sort of set up for success. So obviously there's been a big move to sort of agile ways of working, but sometimes like there isn't sort of an iterative or innovation mindset within organisations, and they want to layer AI on top of that. So I think that we're seeing that companies need to kind of nail the basics and then sort of like use that as a foundation to sort of excel. You could be interested in your sort of views on that as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the productivity stat I think is really interesting. We see in the users that are really maximizing the tools, because every organization will deploy it and they'll go on their own change journey, and they'll see groups of users that really go for it and some that perhaps don't. And I think that in its own right is a challenge, is an adoption change management challenge. But in the user group that we see that use the tools well, they're saving as much as 10 hours per week thanks to this technology. You think what you can get back from over a day a week, getting back. It's incredible to think the productivity gain. So I would echo what you're saying, Lena, and agree that. And I think that will get better over time as well.
So we have 15 years of data in looking at how construction automated this one particular bit of their planning work. And that is the metaphor that I bring into all of these conversations, right? We haven't seen the decimation of commercial real estate building. We haven't seen those jobs disappear. In fact, we've seen growth in the employment in that industry because, again, you get the time back for the kinds of tasks. And it was the tasks that were boring. They took a lot of effort, but they didn't have a big payout for the thing. But they had to be done, and they had to be done precisely and well. And I think that's one of the concerns that we'll see as we go forward with this work is how, and this would be my question for the panel, would be, how do we make sure that we keep people sharp so that they can do the work of detecting when things are wrong, proofing out what they're working on, doing that quality assurance, and delivering on the creativity. Yes, catching up on meeting minutes, sure, that's a really low priority in terms of where the organization is. But if it's that one urgent message or that one urgent action point that I need to be focusing on, how am I making sure that I'm not missing that thing? And I think that's going to be the organizational challenge. That's going to be a change management challenge that we're going to focus on. How do we make sure we get people's attention on the thing they need to be focused on and free them up from some of the other things?
That's a very good point. How many of you in this room, hands up, have used AI or generative AI tools to support you in work? And how many of you are confident in your ability to use it safely?
And if I may, how many of you have done this as part of something that was had the blessing of your manager or your boss, or was it your own experiment? Own experiment? And your company knew you were doing these tools or had encouraged? Yeah, about 50-50. Yeah, interesting.
That's interesting. Nick, what can we do? What should businesses do to support their staff to leverage these tools?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, starting with the regulatory side of things within your own organization, what are your principles of responsible AI usage? We have 6 principles at Microsoft that guide the way we build the products. You can check them out on our website: fairness, inclusiveness, safety, and so forth. And they help us guide the way we think about developing the products. But I think every organization needs to start with its own principles about how it uses AI. And then looking for the tools that are going to adhere to all of your company policies around security, compliance, privacy, and so forth. Making sure that it's being done in a way that it's going to protect your sensitive information. One of the challenges right now is a lot of people are taking stuff from within the organization and pasting it into openly available tools on the internet, and that poses a safety risk. So making sure that this is done with IT support and the right governance in place. So I think that's the second point I would say. And then the third point comes on to some of the points we were making earlier, essentially about that end user experience. This is a new paradigm shift. For interacting with technology. And I'd argue the biggest shift since the graphical user interface. And you've got to go on a journey, and I've been on my own personal journey over the last 5 months on essentially prompt engineering, right? You've got to learn how to write a good prompt. You've got to give the prompt a bit of context. You've got to be clear about what goals you want to achieve. You need to give it references or sources to information that you think is useful, and also what the outcome is going to be. And so you've got to treat it much more like an employee than perhaps a search engine. And so just going on that mental shift to learn how to write good prompts and also be creative about the scenarios in which generative AI can actually help you. Again, it requires you to really think hard about it. So it's an exciting journey, but you've got to embrace it.
Yeah, Lena, you are also on the similar journey because your job title is Gen AI Strategy Lead, and I don't think you could have had that job title a year ago.
That's completely correct, to be honest. And there's a stat that is that 60% of roles or jobs that exist today didn't exist in 1940. If you think back then, roles like professionals weren't really around. There's been a rise in professionals. So when you actually think about how jobs and like workers have evolved over time, there's a constant shift, and that shift continues. I think that actually before I was in this space, I worked in product management. Again, growing up when I was at school, product management wasn't a role. It wasn't something that was, heard of or something that you would aspire to do. So I think the types of roles that are available are changing, and with any kind of technical shift, new jobs are created, jobs are changed, jobs are lost. And it's kind of naturally how we evolve in the workplace. So I don't think it's something to be feared, and I don't think that it's something that we can avoid, to be honest. What Nick was saying about principles, completely agree. We're working with companies to put guardrails in place and guidance to make sure that people know what they should be doing and shouldn't be doing with this technology. I think that's the kind of the disadvantage of how easy these tools are to use, that you kind of think, there's all these amazing use cases. I could put in my finances and it will help me work out, my self-assessment tax and things like that. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Actually, you're putting in loads of personal data so that you can quickly work something out. And I think that people just need to be sort of wary of licensed versus unlicensed tool and the kind of data they are inputting into these tools, because they are so easy to use. It's so easy to kind of make a mistake or slip up, which is quite interesting.
Thank you. Gina, you've also been looking at safety because you're now working with the TUC, trade union, on drafting a potential AI at work bill. What's that look like?
Right. So we at the Menderu Center for Technology and Democracy have formed the Secretariat for a stakeholder group to inform what employment law for the 21st century should look like. So the Trades Union Congress is taking the lead on drafting a new AI and employment bill for the UK. They're working with a labor side AI law firm that has extensive experience on how workers understand their rights around digital technologies. And the firm has done, Cloisters Chambers has done wonderful advanced thinking in terms of what employment law should look like. And the idea is to get something that is fit for work for now. So there are all kinds of parts of labor law that doesn't really apply when we think about how new kinds of tools will make automated decisions about work and workers. So we are asking a whole host of people, from human resources professionals, techUK, the BCA, BCS, the Ada Lovelace Institute, Alan Turing Institute, a whole host of people from industry, civil society, and government, including multiple party representation of MPs in the room, to think through what does this bill look like, why, and how can we inform and shape it. The goal will be that in February, we hope to wrap up our work and to have it ready for 2024, because we all know there will be an election, that people will be talking more about this, and we need to get some of these questions answered. It shouldn't just be up to the companies making the tools about what our labor law should be. So for example, should people have a right to being able to ask questions about the decisions that were made about them? Do they have a right to ensure to assurance that tools are fair and unbiased? Do they have a right to who has the responsibility if a piece of software that is being used for HR decisions, does the responsibility lie with the software company, or does it lie with the employer? And those kinds of questions need to be clarified into law, given that we know much of this work will quickly be automated.
Thank you. Lena, I saw you nodding away.
No, that was really interesting actually, because I think that people are overlooking, people sort of within businesses are sort of overlooking some of these considerations at the moment. And they're just thinking, how can we start quickly? How can we move at pace? Like, how can we produce something that we can show the board to say, actually, we are moving into this space? So it's great to hear those conversations that are happening and think about how we can actually regulate some of these things, to think about those considerations. And it's interesting to connect the dots between how that works kind of at a societal level and then filters down into these organisations.
Nick, do you have a view on what government should do on this?
Yeah, we have a very clear view. Firstly, it needs to be done globally. It can't just be done in individual countries. If you look at the way aviation is governed, it's governed with a global policy. Secondly, from a principle point of view, there are really two key principles. Firstly, take a risk-based approach. So don't just try and govern all of AI in one go. Let's just look at the systems that are causing harm and deal with those independently from the other systems that can enable growth and opportunity. And secondly, it has to be human-led. And that's as simple as that, really.
And when you talk about human-led, do you mean business leaders?
No, human society involved in making the decisions around how this AI technology is going to be used in our everyday lives, from government, private sector, and so forth.
And so what would you suggest to business leaders to do then?
Well, I think I come back to some of the points I made before in terms of, firstly, what are your own policies for your own organisations? How are you going to use this responsibly? Making sure you've got all the right checks and systems in place to make sure it's secure and compliant, etc. And make sure users really understand the benefits. So I think that's a slightly different angle, I think, for business leaders.
And users have to understand also the potential harms and risks, because we're relying, as societies, we're relying on people being the smart users of these systems. And that's where we have an enormous amount of capacity building to do, right? We have one system, one automated detection tool for sepsis was rolled out in a hospital in North Carolina. This was an in-house development by a fabulous team at Duke University Hospitals. And when they rolled the system out, they hit two key organizational challenges. First, you can't tell a group of clinicians that there was a quote-unquote AI-powered tool to identify who had sepsis or not. They were terrified of this. Why? Because they were afraid doctors and nurses would shut down their own clinical opinion and stop doing their own assessment of who was at risk for sepsis. They didn't want over-reliance on the tool. So they said, here's an additional tool. If it triggers an alarm, you really should bring this person in, but keep doing your own assessments. And the second organizational problem, absolutely, change management 101. Who was monitoring the system and what kind of power did they have in the organization? And we see this time and time again when new kinds of innovations are brought into existing workplaces. We have to renegotiate the rules of the game. And this is why the book that I'm working on change management is literally called Negotiating Innovation. People in these environments are going to make these negotiations. They're going to negotiate with each other. They're going to negotiate with their bosses, and they're going to negotiate with the technology. And at the end of the day, they are going to negotiate with the regulations, because the rules that matter for them to get their work done, they'll hold on to. And the ones that don't, well, we'll find a way to get the job done. And so we have to make sure that we're creating a regulatory environment that supports people, supports them where they are at, empowers them for doing that experimentation and play, and allows that kind of negotiation that really sparks innovation. That's what I think is going to really be the thing that ignites this moment and the large language model moment. We're going to, when we get people to that level of capacity, we're going to see real creativity, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
And how should businesses change their approach to learning and development to evolve with this?
I have an answer, but I want to hear Nick's answer first.
Well, it starts, we've talked about the prompt, and I've given some examples of what a great prompt looks like, but you've really got to start there. And identify users that can go on that journey quickly. And we've seen this actually. We've been, like I said, been working with lots of customers over the summer who've been trialing our Copilot technology before it was generally available. And what we saw pretty consistently across all those different organizations is you get these tech-savvy forward groups of individuals that have a passion for it because they can see the benefit and they want to get involved. And they pop up in all different parts of the organization. You see some of the legal team, you sometimes see someone from finance, sometimes from HR, sometimes from a sales organization. So there's no consistency in as to what profession get excited, but you see a mindset. And the organizations that have harnessed those individuals have accelerated their adoption change management because they've empowered them, they've given them the opportunity to go be evangelists within their own organization, and those people individually have then brought others along. And so you create this kind of evangelism network. And so it's quite simple, actually.
You hear that? It's simple.
but you've got to focus on that. If you spend too much time thinking about programs, governance, I mean, that's all important, but like you've got to get to the brass tacks of writing good prompts and getting people to evangelize about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's such a great point, right? That you can lead change management from the top all you want, but it is literally people with the tools in front of them that make the change. And if you don't set that environment up well for them to do that work, it will fail. And we see this time and again in different kinds of sectors and different kinds of points of change, that being able to create that space for experimentation and negotiation with new technologies is absolutely what needs to happen. So I love this. I love the idea of the evangelist, like the front line.
And I'll tell you another fun thing. In some organizations, for those that wanted the license but didn't start using it, they took it away. And that was really smart because it then forced people to really think about, if I've got this thing, I've got to make sure I use it. And they had a long waiting list of others that wanted it, and therefore they could give it to those people as well. So that active management of who has access, especially as you're in those earlier kind of pilot phases, I say is a nice little technique for management of your people.
Thank you. Lena, how has And Digital's approach to learning and development changed? And you've created a new digital skills forum. Why on earth have you done that?
So a few different things there. So digital skills forum, absolutely necessary at the moment, to be honest. I think that, like we said earlier, there was already a digital skills gap here in the UK, but at the moment, we just need to crack on with it. We need to do something about it. We need to move at pace because technology is moving at such pace. And what the Digital Skills Forum is, it's a collaboration between industry, businesses, governments, and educational institutes with the specific aim of closing the UK's digital skills gap, which is the mission that And Digital are on. So it's aimed at leaders across different businesses who come together and try to create working groups to solve these problems in the digital skills area. Our next event we've just launched last week, and our next event is at the House of Commons in March. So if you would like to get involved in that, please do get in touch with me. But why is it so important? I think, it's this rate of change. As to Nick's answer regarding how important prompt engineering is, I completely agree, right? That's one of the key skills. The other key skill that I'm seeing at the moment within our teams, as we try and upskill internally the entire business on AI skills, is actually problem solving. So one of the ways that we are upskilling people is through sort of like getting them involved in internal proof of concepts, having them build things out, working cross-functionally, so not just our sort of like data engineers and our tech folk, but also our sort of non-tech roles. And what we're really seeing is the key skill that they're identifying that they need to be really good at is problem solving. Like all of this essentially is that human skill of working out like what the right tools are, how to use them to do things better. So the role of human skills in all this is becoming even more crucial, ironically.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. We've got time for questions. Does anyone have, got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's take them all. Please state your name and where you're from.
Yeah, Chris Mear from the School of Code. Loads to, I'll ask one, because there's loads to ask you about, really interesting. But I guess if I'm going to pick one, so the framing seemed to be, we need something fit for now, lots of change. But I think the framing, maybe that's shaping an ethical present for British jobs. But I think the future is not something that I've heard a lot of. There's a moving target here. And what we're talking about is, we're talking about these things like they're static tools. And that's how humans process things. It's really hard for us to imagine exponential curves, but these things are not static tools. Like by the time you've legislated for what's happening today, things have moved on. So I'm just curious about, prompt engineering, for example. We've trained LLMs, which are, neural networks, 50 years old, whatever, but really came to the fore in the last couple of years because of computing power. Trained them on basically the whole of the internet, and they've learnt language. So how long, now ChatGPT's got 100 million users inputting prompts. Some are good, some are bad. It's evaluating them. So how long do we think it will be before it understands what a good prompt is, can generate prompts itself? So, a lot of this stuff is like Band-Aids on a growing wound. And I think it would be really good to hear what you think of the future. Is there a plateau and actually we're in a hype cycle and it's going to be a winter again like it has been before? Or is there a different thing that you think is on the way, really?
Thank you so much, Chris. We've got one more question at the front, and then we'll take them all together, if that's okay.
Hi, I'm Seb from Computer Weekly. Might be a bit blasphemous, so bear with me. So like in the early 20th century, the promise of technology was pretty much that eventually we won't have to work. Now it's like, and that was like something people seriously were considering at the time. Now the promise of technology is we're freeing up all this time for you in your work so you can do more work. I think the average person doesn't find that particularly inspiring. So kind of, just what are your thoughts on that, and when should we start having those conversations? And we need new things in place to get employment laws up to scratch in the 21st century. But what's on the horizon after that? Because it can't just be constant productivity growth forever and ever until like the heat death of the universe, Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. We've been writing them down, don't worry.
This is actually related to the first question, so maybe you could just loop it in. The first question, in regards to prompt engineering, I guess there's some people in the community that have been saying you actually don't need to worry about it for that long because soon LLMs will not need as much handholding. And so to add on, I guess, to the first question, what would be the next skill after prompt engineering? And when those predictions haven't really come with the timeline. So I guess I'll ask the kind of annoying question of if you have a timeline in regards to maybe when prompt engineering won't be as relevant of a skill.
Thank you. Right, so the first question from Chris from the School of Code was looking at how do we legislate for tomorrow, and how do we consider these tools as being dynamic rather than static?
I'll take a quick stab at dynamic rather than static. And I will say, workers feel more stretched than a hand-pulled noodles, right? They really, like this idea that people feel that they are at their capacity is something that I think we are coming to for professional work coming out of COVID. The best economic estimates that we have today suggest that we'll have net job growth due to the gains of AI. But that acknowledges that we will eliminate jobs, and that will be hard. And that will be hard in places. It will be hard in communities, and it will be hard for types of workers. And I think the conversations that we've been having around AI, for the first time, knowledge workers and professional workers have said, oh, wait, you mean my skills, right? On the whole, I'm an optimist because people are really creative, and societies to flourish need us to do things. Like, we need to do wonderful, meaningful things in order to succeed and thrive. One conversation I had with someone in the AI safety community said, first, that artificial general intelligence would come in precisely 8.5 years. Okay, 8.5, like, huh? And then he said, and you know, you do future of work. I said I introduced myself in doing future of work, and he's like, yeah, there will be no jobs in 8.5 years. And I thought, oh wow, you have never had kids. You don't have aging parents. You've never taught in a classroom. There are so many things that we need to do as societies that is not going to be automated away, right? So I'm cautiously optimistic, but if I may tie this into the second question, these are not choices for Microsoft, no offense, or and Digital, no offense, or even me, right? These are choices that societies make about what work they value and how work is valued. And I think that's the conversations that we need to be having now. So absolutely, yes, for our own particular jobs, we will have new kinds of things that we're going to need to learn to do. If my grading, my marking and assessment work gets automated, bless, I will be thrilled. Like, I want that job off my plate. Let me do other kinds of things. We will find that the composition of the tasks in our work will change quite drastically. And for some workers, that will be hard. We as societies need to be ready to help everybody make those transitions. And it's not just skills, it's not just retraining, it is being able to have those hard conversations about what we want societies to look like. And that's where we get, I think, to better things. But of course, we're going to get there through prompt engineering, right?
And Nick, you know, we can't have these productivity gains be endless. So what are we going to do with the time that we gained?
It's the second question, right?
Yeah.
It's a great question. It's the type of work I think that we need to start thinking about. In many cases, these tools are helping getting rid of the drudgery, as you just described, you know, the mundane tasks. What would you do if you have more time back? And we've been asking people that question, and actually over half the people we ask tend to focus on a few things. They say either reading, learning, or working on more creativity, more creative tasks that require my human ingenuity. And so we're so early on in this journey. It's hard to answer the question, but the thought that humans could have more time to do those things, I think, is very exciting and very empowering. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it evolves over time. So I hope that helps to answer the question you asked, because yeah, that's.
Can I just mention quickly on those 3 points, so reading, learning. So, but on those exact things, on those exact things, what reads better, you or ChatGPT now? ChatGPT now, read everything ever printed. What learns better, you or ChatGPT now? ChatGPT now learns from big data that would blow, not you, but you know, my brain. You know, it's not a personal thing against humans. So I think, you know, it sounds good to say free spare time, but I think on your point, it's about chatting about what future do we want, and how do we value different things. There's no current economic way to value raising kids. You know, there's just not. We don't have an economic value to that. Nobody gets paid, at least very well, to raise their kids. That's something we'd all say is really important, but the current system doesn't allow us to value it. So we need to sort of explore.
That's great.
Exactly what you said, right?
Just care in general. You know, you can broaden it to that. The other thing I would say is there's a lot of job opportunity that comes from this era. You know, you need the people to train the models. You need people, data scientists, to understand how to govern data. You need people to think about the ethical side of things and governance side. Like, the list goes on. Even just teaching people how to use the technology, right? So I think this poses opportunity to think about what's the job creation as well as what is the time used for.
And let's be fair, there's a lot of work in cleaning these models up. And that's work that doesn't happen in Western economies. It is far away, it is not seen, it is not good work. And yet it's vital to these tools being fit for purpose or being safe for work. So I think we have to be really thoughtful about where work is, who is doing work, and the long chains of human value that are going into supporting what looks sometimes like magic, but is actually the result of thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. And will continue to be in LLMs, will continue to be for the foreseeable future.
Lena, we have time for one more answer, and that was from this lady, the question on what will be the next most important skill post prompt engineering?
I'm going to go, I think it's the skill that I said that is important now. I think it's problem solving. I think it's the human skills of being able to work out how to utilize this technology, how to innovate, how to solve problems that we have. Not just in the workplace, but things around climate change and bigger sort of problems that we have, right? So I think that the key skill is currently and will always be problem solving, and it's a very human skill. And I think that's where people should be focusing their attention. But Nick, I'm keen to hear your answer as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I love that problem solving.
Prompt engineering.
Because I don't think the prompt's ever going to go away. I agree with your question in that it will probably become more intelligent over time, but it's not going to go away. But also the scenarios in which, to the problem solving point, the scenarios in which you're going to deploy it. I'll give you an example. Someone from our HR team discovered that if they prompted to say replace all of the personally identifiable information with a question mark, you can suddenly redact a person's CV really quickly. That's really exciting for them, because no longer have they got to sit there with a black marker pen or a digital version of that. And so you start to see some really creative ideas on how it's going to be used. That comes back to your problem solving point. But additional things, just being intellectually curious about where's the content coming from, looking for biases, identifying hallucinations. These are all skills that require humanity, empathy, and what we're good at as a society. So that's where our value comes in, and that's where we're going to need to spend time thinking about it. And the reason we get to do all those things is because some of the mundane gets taken away.
100% agree that comprehension can never be automated. Please join me in thanking this fantastic panel. And thank you so much for your wonderful questions.
Thanks all.
The last plenary of the day is happening in that room, so please do grab a hot beverage, and we'll see you in there.